Hello and welcome to this next GCSE English language video. Today we're going to be looking at the reading part of the exam. Okay, so as you know, you've got your exam coming up. So this video is just going to be going over the main skills that you need for the reading components across the two papers. Okay, so it's just a quick reminder basically. Quick recap review of, like I said, what's included in both reading papers and some of the skills, some advice of how to do as best as you can in the forthcoming exam. Okay, so remember there are two papers, two separate exams. First one is fiction, second one is non-fiction. You have reading and writing tasks in both papers, paper 1 and paper 2. But for the reading paper, although you are reading different texts, the skills that you require are very similar across both papers. So this is what the aim of this video is, just to like a summary of those skills that you do need for the reading paper. Okay, so three main things that you need: coverage of the text, theme, and a minimum of 6 quotations for the 10-mark questions. So by coverage of the text, it's the idea that when you're asked to find quotations, you find them from the start, middle and the end of the text or of the extract, the lines that you've been asked to analyse. Okay, so for any kind of 10-mark question, it's really important that you get ideas from the start, the middle and the end of the extract. Theme of the question. So this is when you're identifying the quotations that you need, you understand what particular aspect of the text is the question asking you to analyse or look at. If you get the wrong theme, you're really going to struggle to find the relevant quotations. Finally, 6 quotations for 10-mark questions. It's not as straightforward as 1 quotation equals 1 mark, but it's not too far off that. So to give yourself the best chance of getting a high mark in these in the reading exam, you do need to be able to locate and explain as many quotations as you can. So maybe like some exams you've taken before, you're encouraged to do, maybe just 1 or 2 or 3 quotations, but a lot of description. In the exam that you're taking now, it's really about finding a range of quotations, a range of ideas from across the text, and a simple comment which explains how it links to the theme of the question. So as you can see, these 3 ideas all link in together. Okay, so look at 3 main skills in today's video. So the first one is reading for detail. Okay, so this comes up in both in paper 1 and in paper 2. So in paper 1, there's just one question of this, where you're reading for specific detail, and that's question 1, where it's about five details. There's 5 things that we learn about the character, we learn about the place, whatever it might be. Okay, so for this one, it's a mixture of implicit and explicit information. So implicit means something which is implied. So it's the idea that you might need to kind of read between the lines a little bit. Explicit information is information which is very clear and obvious and for everybody to see. So question 1 on paper 1 is a mixture of both of those types of information you're looking for. In paper 2, questions 1 and 3 are very straightforward. Find the specific detail and 3 marks for each question. And then question 5 is about finding details from 2 different texts on a similar theme, and that's 4 marks. So in total, there are 15 marks available across the 2 papers just for reading for specific detail. So if you can get these ideas right, it gives you a really good chance to stack up some points early on in the exam. Okay, so we're just going to practice a question 1 from paper 1 because it's quite a straightforward skill. So once you've got it, you can apply the same ideas across all of those skills. Okay, like I said, so we're going to look at an example question now. So the questions are for paper 1, it's things like list reasons or details, make a list, explain 5 things you learn about the character. Okay, so if you go to the reading task, Okay, the question is read lines 1 to 10 and there's 5 things that you learn about Ove's father in this extract. Okay, so let's just scroll to the top here. Okay, so it's just this short paragraph here. Okay, so I want you to pause the video, okay, and read through this and then just write down in your books 5 things that we learn in this extract about Ove's father. Remember, you're looking for a mixture of implicit and explicit information. Okay, so welcome back. Okay, so there will always be more than, for this question, there will always be more than 5 things that you will be able to find. Okay, so he worked for the railways. He had deep wrinkles on his face. He had thick hair. Had a slender body. Had sharp muscles. He was very good at arm wrestling. Because he was very strong. He gave advice to his son, etc. So if you can see that the first 5 are very straightforward, just things that are mentioned in the texts. The last 2 are the ones that require a little bit more implicit reading and understanding. Okay, so like here, his father wore every one of them down. Okay, so when we're talking about the arm wrestling competition, so that's us kind of understanding that phrase means that he won every competition. He was strong. He was good at arm wrestling. Okay, and then this last one, he said, "Ove, only a swine thinks size and strength are the same thing." Remember that? Ove never forgot it. Okay, so again, he gave some good advice. Okay, so remember, for this question on paper 1, question 1, do you need to be aware of that mixture of implicit and explicit information. Then for paper 2, it will be very straightforward. It will be something like that'd be, so for each, if you remember, there were 2 main questions 1 and 3. So they're about a different text but exactly the same, and each of those questions will have 3 kind of parts to it. So it'll be where were they taken, what did they find, where did he work, that type of thing. Okay, so again for that one, just need to find 1 piece of information. Okay, so like I said, so a fairly straightforward question. You know, straightforward skill. So, you know, if you can get this skill right, read the question carefully, understand exactly what you're being asked to find, you shouldn't have any problem with picking up a good number of points across here. Okay, so what we're coming up to next is the how question. Okay, so I'd say that nearly half the marks in the reading exams are based on this how question. Okay, so there are 2 questions like that in paper 1 and 1 in paper 2. And there's also an impressions question, which is quite similar type of thing. Okay, so these how questions are testing your ability to show that you can understand how a writer creates a certain feeling, impression in a text. Sometimes it might ask you what impression is created and how does the writer create that impression. So as I was saying, there's that crossover between the impression question and the how question. So like I said, asking you to identify what you think, feel about a text. So sometimes it might not be caged as a how question. It might say, what are your thoughts and feelings about this extract? It might say what impression is created. But basically, I've kind of merged them all together, give that idea of the how question. Okay, so again, the main skill you need here is identifying those relevant quotations and then being able to comment, make a sensible, clear comment about what that quotation suggests or implies, how it links to the theme of the question. Okay, so here we have a breakdown of the specific how question. So like I said, so it's 25 marks in paper 1 and 10 marks in paper 2. So like 35 marks altogether. So if you can get this question clear in your mind and you practice it a lot, it gives, you know, once you're confident about doing one of these questions, then you should be able to apply the same skill, same knowledge across the board to each question there. Okay. So again, it's about asking you to analyse how writers create a specific effect. So you need to focus on what the writer does, the choices that they make. So you should consider maybe the content, what happens in the text, and the language that is used to express that. So for this one, you can either, so for the fiction paper, you can maybe talk about what the character does, okay, and how that affects your understanding of the character, and then about the language that is used by the writer. In a non-fiction text, possibly a little bit about what the characters do, but maybe a bigger focus on the language and specific words that are used there. Okay, so a couple of things just to remember. In order to get a good grade, it's really important to talk about the effect and the meaning of the language. Okay, so for example, say you've picked out the phrase, "she sobbed like an abandoned baby." Don't just say, "The writer uses a simile here to show us how she feels." Okay, but instead do say, "The use of the simile of the abandoned baby reinforces how frightened and alone the main character feels." Okay, the marks for saying what the language means, not for just identifying what language feature is used. In fact, if you took out the word simile and say the use of the image of the abandoned baby, you'd still get a good mark there, because it's what the language means which is important, not that he uses a simile. Okay. So again, another way to improve your grade is always thinking about what the writer does. Okay, so it's really important to say, start each sentence out, "The writer then does this." Here the writer says, here this shows. Okay, so if you think about what is the writer doing, it helps you to focus on the question and stop just from retelling the story of what happens or what he's describing. Okay, so here we've got 4 useful sentence starters that you can use to kind of talk about the effect of the language. Yeah, so this shows, this suggests, this implies, this gives the impression that. Again, if you can use, at the end of the day, if you use the same one each time, it's not a terrible thing at all. But obviously, if you can use a couple, it creates a better impression on the examiner. Okay. And so if you can see that correctly, I thought it might be useful to see kind of, this is the mark scheme, kind of generic mark scheme, and the division between, getting between 1 and 4 marks and getting 5 and above. So as we've always said, hopefully your teacher's always told you, you need to be aiming for half marks. Okay, if you can get half marks throughout the GCSE English language exam, then you will pass the exam. The pass mark has never been below that. So what you need to focus on is getting on this one. Okay, so identify and comment on a range of quotations. Shows understanding of how this creates the mood in the extract. May begin to use relevant subject terminology. So you can easily get 6 out of 10 without mentioning a simile or metaphor at all. But the key thing is a range of quotations. You understand what that quotation means and how it links to the theme or the mood. Okay, so this is what you need to be aiming for. Okay, but to get higher, it's accurate and interesting comments on a wide range of quotations. In other words, the more quotations you use and the more kind of perceptive you are, the higher mark you will get. Okay, so if you can see, so we've gone from reasonable number of quotations to get 3 or 4 marks, a range of quotations to get 5 to 6, a wide range of quotations to get 7 to 8, and the wide and appropriate range of extracts to get 9 to 10. So this just gives you an idea. Basically, the more quotations you find, the more relevant the comment you make, the higher mark you will get. So let's practice this. So I want you to go back to that revision paper. I want you to read the first 20 lines there. And the question is, how does the writer show Ovi's discomfort, feelings of being uncomfortable in this passage? So you need to think about what happens to show his discomfort, the writer's use of language to describe this, and the effects on the reader. Okay, so again, just to reinforce, to approach this question, you find the relevant quotations that link to the theme, identify their effect, back to the theme, okay, and then always track your answer through the text. So write about the events, the language, and the order in which they happen in the text. Talk about what happens at the start, the middle, and the end of the extract. Okay, it's easier for you. It's also easier for the examiner to mark because he'll be following you through as you read your way, work your way through the extract. Okay, so here, got a very straightforward structure to use. The writer shows the reader, link to theme of the question throughout this extract. So for this, it would be the writer shows the reader Ove's feelings of discomfort throughout this extract. One way is in the quotation, which tells us, and then effect on the reader. Another way is, and then link back to the theme, and then continue on that structure. So although it is a little bit repetitive, okay, one advantage of this is that it forces you to follow that simple pattern of quotation, effect, link to the theme. Quotation, effect, link to the theme. You work that way through, you're not going to go wrong. Okay, so if you go back to the text now, so I want you to now pause the video for 10-15 minutes. Okay, so you probably have about 12-13 minutes in the exam for these 10-mark questions. Okay, so here we've got the text here. How does the writer show Ove's feelings of being uncomfortable in this passage? So I want you to pause the video here. Okay, work your way through it, and then we'll come back and see if you've identified the same ones as me. Okay, welcome back. Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through it, and I'm just going to highlight the ones that I found. Okay, so the first time I'm trying to put Ove out to the old wooden house, Ove and her father sat in buttoned-up silence opposite each other. So you've got this one here, sat in buttoned-up silence opposite each other. Okay, and then also staring down at their food for almost an hour also shows their discomfort. Okay, neither two men could quite understand what they were doing there. Okay, as for Ove, he felt he was at a job interview. He'd never been very good at that sort of thing. Okay, and then moving on. So you can have a sort of silence. Okay, yeah. He looked around, certain desperation to find something to ask this old man about. Okay, maybe this one, he noted the angular stitches around the edges of her eyes. So we've got about 8 quotations there. Okay, so if we go back to the PowerPoint, bear with me, there we go. Okay, so we've got an example of how we can start it here. So the writer shows the reader that Ove is clearly uncomfortable right from the start of the extract. Describing them as being in buttoned-up silence opposite each other, staring down at food for almost an hour. The use of the metaphor of buttoned-up silence implies that they are almost incapable of talking, as if the ability to talk has been locked away. We are then told that Ove felt that he was at a job interview. The use of this image reinforces the fact that this was not a pleasant experience for Ove at all. The idea that he is being interviewed and judged by her father, and so on and so on. So hopefully you can see there. So you've got quotation, got some language features, some identification of technique, and then the important thing is a comment about the quotation. Okay, good. So that's the how question. So obviously, you know, that one's a really key one. Okay, so what we're going to look at next is the evaluation judgment question. And there's one question in each paper will be this type of question. So in paper 1, fiction, there'll be a question asking you to make a judgment, normally on the whole extract. Okay, so it might ask you to look at one part of it and then the extract as a whole, so that normally it does ask you to make a judgment on that. In paper 2, it's question 4, and that's asking you to make a judgment or evaluate the 19th century text. Okay, so Each of those, I should have said, is 10-mark question. Okay, so again, that's 20 marks. Okay, so that's a quarter of the whole exam on this type of question. Okay, so an evaluation, okay, is a judgment of something or someone. Okay, so if you're asked to evaluate something, maybe asked to engage with the text and think carefully about what's happening, how that makes you feel. Okay, so it might be, what do you think about what you've just read? Yeah, do you agree with a statement or not? What can you say about how the text works? So there's two possible question types. First is an agree or disagree question. So example, to what extent do you agree that the writer creates an atmosphere of tension in this extract? Or it can be some sort of evaluation question. Evaluate how the writer presents the relationship between Lucy and her mum. Okay, so similar to a certain extent. The first one, you're given a statement of fact, or sorry, I should say statement of opinion, and you have to kind of agree with it or not. And the second one is ask you to evaluate something within the text itself. Okay, so if it's an agree question, so I'd say always agree with the statement if you can. It's always or most often easier to prove something than disprove it. Okay, not always. Sometimes the statement might be, say, 50-50, or you could argue against it. Okay, but do be careful. It is possible to kind of tie yourself in knots trying to argue against something. Well, it's much easier to argue for it. Okay, so again, just reading through the text, highlighting the sections which refer to the question. What does the writer do to show this? How successful is it? And if appropriate, reflect back on the rest of the story. Okay, so certain structure here. I agree that is successful at presenting the character. One way in which he does this is in the example, which has the effect. Okay, so if it's an evaluation question, like I say, if it asks you to evaluate how the character or how the relationship is presented, you need to kind of summarise what you feel about that character. Yeah, and then think, how does the writer create that impact, that effect? What techniques does the writer use? What language? Okay, what quotations? What do you think and feel about it? Okay, so we've got another example here. In this extract, the writer presents a relationship or the character as, and then whatever you think about it. One way in which the writer does this can be seen in which has the effect of whatever it might be. Okay. So again, we're going to go back to the reading pack. So here the writer creates an impression of the singer Bessie Smith as someone really talented. To what extent do you agree with the statement? So as we said, you have to identify the theme. So that is Bessie Smith is presented as talented. So you need to find evidence for you to agree or disagree with this statement. And you need to comment on each question to show how this demonstrates that Bessie Smith is talented or that she isn't talented. Choice is yours. So again, pause the video for a bit. Okay, so you got here evaluation question, agree or disagree. Okay, so read through this text here. Yep, and then decide whether you agree that the singer is presented as someone talented, or whether you disagree and why that is. Okay, and then we'll come back and check your answers. So pause the video, like about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll come back and check. Okay. So, go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, so for this one, I would agree that she is presented as talented. So I came up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 quotations there. You might have some more. Okay, that's fine. So 9 possible quotations to use. Each of those quotations, I feel, can be used to show that she is talented in some way. So Bessie had such a ringing vibration, that voice of hers, hypnotised by the walloping blues that came throbbing out of Bessie's throat. Dave and I just melted together in the blaze of Bessie singing. She never needed any twirls and twitches to send those golden notes of hers on their sunshiny way. But she was an artist right down to her fingertips, a very great artist, born with silver strings for vocal cords. Her style was so individual, nobody else ever grasped it. She made up her own melody to fit the poetry of the song. She lived every song she sang. Okay, I mean, these are just some of the ones. You might have chosen something different. But again, as long as it demonstrates that she's talented, that's the main thing. Okay, so again, a way of answering this one. So this is kind of like a model start. So you start with a sentence stating your opinion. So I agree. So it could be I partially, I fully agree, I somewhat agree. Choice is yours. But here I'd say I agree that the writer is successful at creating an impression of Bessie Smith as a very talented singer. One way in which he achieves this can be seen in the quotation, hypnotised by the walloping blues that came throbbing out of Bessie's throat. This has the effect of implying that her voice as I was singing was so affected that they could literally hypnotise people, make them forget what they were doing. Okay, so I've got opening sentence, it's me agreeing with the statement, stating my point of view. Okay, I've got a quotation here, and then a simple commentary on the quotation and how it creates the idea that she was talented. Okay, so here, she's so talented she can almost hypnotise people, forget what they were doing. Good stuff. Okay, so final thing we're going to look at today is the comparison question. Now this is only in paper 2, because as hopefully you do know by now, paper 2 has 2 texts, whereas paper 1 only has 1 text for you to read. Okay, so again, although there's 2 texts and you're comparing them, the approach is the same as you would expect. So you need to identify the theme of the question, you need to identify quotations linked to that theme, excuse me, you must include quotations from both texts, okay, otherwise you will only get maximum of 1 point. So really important, if you don't include ideas or relevant ideas from both texts, you will only get maximum of 1 mark. Even if everything you've written down is great, because it is a comparison question, you do need to be able to include details from both texts. Okay, so like I said, very simple approach to take is once you've identified the topic, flick through text A and say what does it say about the topic, and then look through text B again, what does it say about the topic. If you can make points of comparison, okay, it's great, but it's not essential. However, if you are aiming for a higher grade mark, more than a grade 4 or 5, okay, then it would be useful to be able to make some sort of point of comparison, some overall statement saying what's the same or what's different about both texts. Okay, so again, go back to the revision pack in a bit. I want you to read those 2 texts and answer the question. Compare what the 2 texts say about the effect on children if their mothers are sent to prison. Identify the specific theme, so here, the effect on children if their mothers are sent to prison, and then focus on quotations that support this. So, again, if you go back to the Word document, here somewhere. Okay, so you've got 2 texts, yeah. So one modern one, text A, and then an older one by Charles Dickens. So to read through those ideas. Okay, and then so pause the video. See how many quotations you can find which are linked to this thing. Okay, so take about 10 minutes or so. At the moment, just look at those quotations and then we'll look at how to answer this question. Okay, welcome back. So hopefully you found lots of quotations. Okay, so here are some of them. So yeah, one thing I forgot to say is because it's a 10-mark question, yeah, you need text from both. You need quotations from both texts. But so I would aim to have at least 3 quotations from each text, 3 or 4. Ideally, you'd have a similar number from text A and text B. If you just had if you say you had 7 and 1, although you've got ideas from both texts, it wouldn't quite work. Okay, so here, So looking back the effect of their mothers being in prison. So for text A, I've got Cheyenne struggled to cope. I was angry, disappointed. Quotation from her. I normally get quite emotional when I get letters. Some days I have my depressing days. I really break down. Being a teenager is a very transitional time, during which it's particularly difficult to be without your mother. Women sometimes don't want their children to see them in jail. It's hard being without your mum. And then text B, the girl was thinly clad and shaking with the cold, but neither hope, condolence, regret nor affection was expressed on either side. She's one of those children born and bred in neglect and vice who have never known what childhood is. They've entered once upon the stern realities and miseries of life. Tell them of hunger and streets, and they will understand you. Okay, so so if you can just get, like I said, at least three quotations from each side, yeah, that will help you to get a good mark for your essay. However, if you wanted to get a better mark, one thing you can do, okay, is also talk about possibly about the techniques that are used. Okay, so just looking at these two texts again, just pause the video and just think what different techniques does the writer use to get his ideas across. And like I said, this isn't essential, but if you want to get the highest mark possible, it might be a good idea just to think about it. So pause the video a couple of minutes, and I'll come back and check. Okay, so for example, what I would say in terms of technique, so for the first article, the modern one, okay, you could say that they interview one of the daughters directly. Yeah, okay, so we have actual first-hand experience, first-hand views on what it means. Okay, they also interview an expert, inverted commas, this Diana Rutherm from the charity Action for Prisoners' Families. So again, you're getting a different perspective, someone who's kind of trained, whose job it is to look about this one as well. Okay, so those are two techniques you could identify of how they do it. Okay, and then for Charles Dickens, once you've got past the the content in terms of techniques, okay, so I'd say there's a lot of emotive language, like the main technique that he uses here. Okay, so hardened beyond all hope of redemption, a squad-looking woman, slovenly thick-bordered cap, thinly clad, okay, and shaking with the cold. All of this, this phrase here, belong to a class that should make men's heart bleed. Okay, so he's being very clear and obvious about the emotional kind of appeal to your heart, which is what Dickens was trying to do there. Okay, so you've got the quotations. You can look about technique if you want to. And to finish with, just a model answer. So giving you the start here, I want you to go on and finish this. So both texts present a depressing view of the effect that prison can have on children whose parents are in prison. Okay, so there I've got some comparison between the two, saying that both of them are obviously quite negative, as you would expect, about the effects on children. And then I start by looking at text A. In text A, we're told that Jane struggled to cope. I was angry and disappointed. This gives us an idea of the emotional impact on the children. This is further reinforced. Okay, so we've got that linking phrase in one text, one quotation, and the next, when we also told that about Cheyenne that some days I have my depressing days, I really break down. So this creates an image of a child severely emotionally affected by the event of her mother being in prison. Okay, so that's what gone a very quick view over the reading paper. So what I want you to do now is go back, think through those ideas, finish off all of the questions if you haven't already. Okay, and like I said, it's about applying those same skills across both paper 1 and paper 2. Okay, thanks very much for watching and good luck.